Hello, welcome to this version of the Database Weekly Meeting. It is January 11th, and we'll jump right into it. So it is Tuesday, first thing, so we'll go through the infra dev review. I looked at the board this morning. Let's click it open. I didn't see any new issues, just going by the date. Jumping back to the agenda. Looks like Jose added some things to the bottom. You wanna, we can go right to you here, Jose, if you want.
Okay.
Let's see.
So I briefly spoke with Yanis today. We texted a bit about this. We are collecting marginalia. We're doing some analysis. We did some sampling from production last week. I would like to know if you're interested that we execute this for all this select star from table where ID equal to something. What do you think, guys? Do you want this marginalia that we do this work around, or is not needed?
So this would allow us to understand where those queries are coming from,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Like it's based on I did with Nikolai, we did a gather of 6,000 rows, more or less, like 20 seconds. Everything that was active, each 20 seconds. So I can add this for the other tables. I remember I did for just projects, or Nikolai did for just projects. There's more 4 tables that we have that we could collect and give you the information. This is good for you, no? Like I just would like to touch base on that.
I would be interested in seeing the raw data for that. I will think
forward you. I have the raw data. I will forward you the email.
Okay, thanks.
Because you mentioned something about some counters, no, Yanis?
Yeah, so what I added in the issue, and we can continue the discussion in the issue, I have also mentioned Andreas, pinged Andreas and Patrick there, is that already the data there are very useful with respect to what we have right now. And on top of that, what is missing in the analysis that Nikolai did is that he only did analysis per job type for sidekick jobs. What we would, if we are going to create a summary going forward in the future, it will be nice to also have summaries, counts for the groupings by web controller action, and also one count for the only web, because those are queries that come from some other places in the application and not from an action. Just that. It's just some additional post-processing over the raw data, nothing more.
Okay.
At least with respect to what we have now, it feels like, at least to me, that this is a great step forward, because we already, for example, for projects, we can see 10 different places where the queries come from. What I'm not sure, and I would love others to pitch in there, is how much time we should sample in order to get an interesting sample so that we can have the information we need.
Great. Yeah, like I have a few points more to share with you, with the team. First of all, I'm looking for PG Sentinel that we can gather more states of the transactions. I think this will be really nice for us to have like the histogram that we have nowadays about queries, about the state on what's going on. So of course we need to test this, and also there's some painful part here that we need to do a switch over / failover, because we need to restart the box to accept this statement. But like I'm collecting several things that requires a restart, so I think it can be useful if we try to put all of them together. But yeah, this is Page Sentinel. Anyone else has any ideas on this or suggestions, please ping me in the issue. The second point is more regarding what we are doing now manually. I'm trying to collect the comments on what we have automatically. Like I'm trying to get the concept on how to do that using Postgres Exporter. I think there is not too much rocket science there, so we can get this pretty straightforward, and keeping like, I don't know, maybe the comments for a couple of weeks or 1 week, and we can do our group buys in Prometheus / Thanos. I think can be really useful for us with everything that we are talking about here. Because nowadays we are importing a small Postgres database and doing our regex to find what we want. That works as well. But we could like do this in Thanos / Prometheus. If you have any thoughts on this as well, I am adding the ratio. And the third one is something that I heard from Stan some time ago, and I found out in my skin today that we have some queries that are pretty big. I was talking with Gresgor today, and he wanted as well to know the marginalia, to know who is calling and from where comes the context of this statement. But unfortunately, this query is really long, and we do not save the whole query in the pgstat in the query field that is limited to 1048 bytes. The proposal here is to increase to the double. Okay, these were the main points I wanted to share with you, with everyone, and any feedback is welcome, and we can keep iterating on them.
Can I ask a quick question about Thanos, about the exporting those comments? What is the source for that? I mean, you explain like we use pgstat activity to do the sampling, and that is clear how that works. Will we also use that to export the data into Thanos, or where does that come from?
Yes, because I have Postgres exporter running on the box, and I can export this automatically to somewhere. Like nowadays, what I did, we did a process like a small, let's say, shell that connects to the database and collect this each 20 seconds. And then manually I have to take this dump from this to somewhere, to import somewhere, and then I do all the process that I want by select statements. My idea here is to make something automated that will be exporting constantly this. We can set up a threshold of time that we keep this data, let's say 1 week or 2, whatever we need, but keep this running automatically. Then when we need, we have this information there. I thought this can make our life easier to collect this data and keep it visible to everyone. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. So we would have Postgres exporter looking at pgstat activity and then pushing the information to Thanos or to Prometheus.
Yes. Yeah.
What would be the frequency of that? I mean, I think Postgres exporter does it once per minute or so.
Yeah, I'm trying to set up something to each 30 seconds. My original idea is to set up something for 30 seconds, but I need to check better. I got the reference where we have Postgres exporter today. I need to investigate more to tell you.
I think Ben Kochi is the man to talk to.
I know I pinged him on the issue and I didn't get answer yet. I think he's busy or out of office. So, but yeah, I will talk with him. And I think some guy from my team did something like that. And I hope it's not too heavy or doesn't bring any other downsides to the implementation.
Cool. Thanks, Jose.
Thanks, Jose. Is there anything the database group here needs from infra? Is there anything we're waiting on or blocked on or don't have status on? All right. I will take that as
I have
a
this
no.
one question. How is going your analysis about the IDs of frequency of IDs generation, Andreas? You mentioned this in some issue and I didn't get
Yes,
too much.
it's at the bottom of the agenda. There is an issue there. Patrick was looking at that yesterday, and we were basically seeing, and Patrick, just correct me what's wrong, but we were seeing CI pipelines are being created at pretty regularly at 5 minutes past the hour. And this is, I mean, the majority of those peaks that we observed, they happen 5 minutes past the hour. So maybe there is a correlation there. And we also know that we have scheduled pipelines, and a lot of them are kicking off, are supposed to kick off at the top of the hour, basically, but they might just end up being kicked off 5 minutes after the hour. So I'm still looking into this, but I'm pretty hopeful that there is some kind of correlation there.
I will
And there is no cron.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, and there is no cron job at the 5th minute every hour.
Yeah.
So
I will put
but sorry about the cron jobs. There is this cron job that is running every 5 minutes, basically. And this is kicking off the scheduled pipeline. So what happens when you have, let's say you're kicking off that scheduler at the top of the hour, and we would need to kick off a lot of pipelines at that point in time, and we start doing that, then basically all those pipelines that kick off at the same time. And the reason why it's 5 minutes past the hour could be that sort of when you look at this at the very top of the hour, then maybe not all pipelines are being triggered. But at 5 minutes past the hour, all of them are being eligible for being triggered. So maybe that explains why they are being kicked off. That's what I'm trying to find out. You know, the Unix cron scheduler has this ability to distribute across the hour if you like it to. Basically not kicking off at every top of the hour, but distributing things. And that could be an option there too for the schedule pipelines. But yeah, kind of like still looking into that, but it's an interesting lead.
Yes, I did in the past some, because this was exactly the same moment that we were crashing when we had the snapshots being executed. And we removed the snapshots, of course, to one node, and we got better. But I remember to investigate a lot of issues happening at the same time. I will put you some links on things that we have found in the past, just to give you some reference, if it makes any sense, okay?
Cool, thanks. And
Thank
just to confirm, we have the majority of those peaks, they are 5 minutes past the hour, right? That's what I'm at least remember from looking at these issues. Have you seen a lot of different peaks or peaks that happen not on 5 minutes past the hour?
Yeah, we have a couple of them on minute 37 or 36. I think there is a reference on 5 minutes after half an hour as well. I did another issue that I put the spikes, and you can see like some big spikes each 1 hour, and each 30 minutes you have a smaller one. I think maybe we have some schedule reference on this.
Cool.
I will
Okay.
share with you the issues.
Thanks.
Please.
All right. Is there anything else we need from Jose or Jerry? If not, can let them go.
All right then. Thanks everyone.
Jerry. Jerry, before you leave.
Too late.
Okay, no worries. I'll reach out to him.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See you,
Bye.
Jose. All right. Unless there's anything else burning, we'll move on to the next. So it's near the end of the milestone. We have quite a bit in here, and we have a friends and family on Friday, and the milestone ends over the weekend. So let's run through these real quick. I think, Pat, you're the closest one on this first one here, the MR pipelines running against PG12.
Yeah, I mean, that's not, I mean, we're not really working on that issue. I think Remy was doing that. It's the MR was, I'm not really sure what, I have to look at it, but it's not really in our tracker anymore, I guess I should say. Like there was input that they were asking for me, I gave that to them. They're working on it.
Should we remove our group and stage from it and assign it to theirs?
Yeah, I think so. At this point, I think it's in their court.
Okay.
Yeah, you also have to unlabel our new and shiny database active label.
Remy's in QE, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Not sure what their label is. Make sure they're gone. Yep. All right, Giannis.
Yep, this is in review. We have to figure out how to deal with this. So one problem with this one is that if we go conservative, we need 6 months. So I have assigned the MR to both Andreas and Pat so that we can check it all together and think about it. There is one interesting thing here. So for this, so we can test with production data, but we cannot test with production hardware. So I know that running this query against Postgres AI, we have a worst case, or a lot of times it takes around 1.5 seconds to update 100 records. So if we go with that, we need 6 months. and something like, if you click there, I have some very nice stats, how 130,000 jobs or something like that. But I bet from our experience, production should go way faster. And we know that Postgres AI sometimes is slow on updates, but we cannot risk it. So we have to figure out how can we check an update query that also needs a DDL, adding a column. How can we check it against production data, against a production server? I asked Jose, they don't have a server right now that we can borrow, but maybe we can think about, and yeah, so let's continue asynchronously there. But I think that 6 months is a lot.
Yeah, we might hit our limit in that time frame, right?
I think we should align the speed of updates to the speed of the vaccination campaigns in Germany and the United States. And, you know, we can figure out who's faster.
Keep the US out of it. We're not doing well here. So, yeah. All right. Patrick.
Yeah, that one is in review. Hopefully it's still going to get merged this week. I think hopefully it will. I think we're narrowing down the approach there. So
Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna go back on this. Events ID.
I lost, did everybody lost Craig? Yeah, can you repeat Craig? Because we couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I was just gonna blame you all because you all froze up. Should we drag the events ID over to 13.9? It's clearly not gonna close in this milestone. Or wait till the end of the week.
Because it's ready. The only thing that we have to figure out is how often we are going to spawn jobs. So the update is ready, the MR is there. So we have to think about, so if we can test somewhere and we can be sure that the update takes 300 milliseconds, we can schedule accordingly or increase the batch size or something that will allow us to run it in 2 months. It's so I would propose to leave it there, but we should check it. And then the last thing we could do, if we cannot figure out another anything else, we could ask Alberto for a solution somewhere to use a server or something. But let's think about it first.
Okay, sounds good. Andreas.
That one has been blocked for a while, but there has been some activity today on the configuration change. So from our side, that's done basically, but it's not yet enabled because it's lacking a configuration change, but that happens soon. So I would leave it there, perhaps even close it. But yeah, let's wait for a couple of more days. Maybe that's completely done then.
Sounds good. Pat.
Yeah, the MR for that was merged. Right now it's running in like an allowed to fail state. So basically we're just monitoring it to see if it's going to have any issues. I haven't seen any so far, but what I'll probably do is close this issue maybe and then create a follow-up just to change that, convert that later to be, you know, break the pipeline when it fails.
Okay.
The next one is closed.
Good. Right.
This is still open, but I think it should be ready for review again. By the way, thanks, Pat, for really paying attention to that detail with the unique index versus the unique constraint. That is really good eyes. So thanks for pointing that out. I'll hand it back to you maybe later today.
Yeah, sure.
Looks like this one's unassigned.
Yep, this is a follow-up of the 12 months migration. So yeah, I think that we can safely send it to next milestone.
Did we ever determine on this one?
No, we have to run. So Patrick has already run a couple of queries. So we have to run the same queries in production and report the results before we drop the table in next milestone. Am I right, Pat?
Yeah, right.
All right, should we just shift it over to 13.9? It's not critical for this week, something we can defer for now. Or is it something you think you'll get quickly done? Well,
I don't think
depending on the milestone.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it will take very long, but I don't know that I'll have time to get to it this week.
Right. Let's move it over. Andreas?
Yeah, next two I'm assigned, but have not time yet to look at it. Smaller bugs.
Okay. Leave them for now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think, is anybody actually working on this one? Is this still an issue, or is this questionable?
Yeah, it's an issue still. I think we have talked last week when we had talked about this one, but there's some ramifications for this relating to the other issue that has to do with the atomic internal ID.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we definitely want to tackle this one as a follow-up, but next milestone probably.
Okay.
Yeah, this one is similar to the other one, waiting for the infra site change. This is happening today in staging, I think. So yeah, that's on track basically.
Okay. There's a lot. We'll talk about 13.9 here in a second. There's a lot in 13.9. There's a few that have been kicked down the road a few times. And I know we have some boards that have been proposed by Giannis and Fabian. So
yeah, I was just about to suggest that we may, so maybe we can quickly walk you through the boards. Shouldn't take too long. And that may actually help us with some decision making with regards to planning, because it makes some of the things that I think were raised in the process discussion more obvious. So for example, how many epics are we working on, right? These kinds of things.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen, or goodness. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Super. Okay, so let's talk about the build board first. And so please stop me when you have any questions, also for Giannis. This is a proposal. It doesn't mean that we have to do it in that specific way, right? So this is really a small, just this is how this can look like. So the first thing is we in Geo, we use a very similar board to this one here, and we call it the build board. There are a few things to know. So this board here aggregates from group database and from this additional label here, database active. And the reason for doing this is that it allows us to control not only what is in these workflow stages, but also what's in the open and closed columns, right? So I personally strongly dislike having hundreds of issues in the open and closed column because it is just super messy, right? So the definition of the active label is really all of the issues that the team, is either planning to work on very soon, right? These are ready for development, as in the next milestone, or maybe even like 1 or 2 milestones, or work that is actually in development right now. So this is essentially a replacement-ish to the milestone board that we just walked through, and the content is actually very similar, right? It lists all of those items. The advantage of this, in my view, is that you can kind of go from right to left, so backwards, right? You can look at all of the blocked things here and say, they are blocked for those reasons and we are okay with that, or we need to take action. You can then go into review and specifically talk about the items that are in review. And so you block sort of the individual stages of the developmental flow. And it makes it also easy to see if you're overloaded in a specific area, right? So for example, right now, which is not so uncommon at the end of a milestone, currently there's nothing labeled as in dev, right? Most things are in review and some are blocked, right? So you can visually kind of see that theoretically people should be able to pick up some things, this week and work on it, or the board is wrong. And one thing that also works here, and this is what we started doing in Geo, which is maybe where we could be at some point, is if you now group these things here by epic, you get swim lanes. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this is essentially visualizing how many epics you work on in parallel. And this is what Patrick pointed out, right? It's like, we're currently working on some automating database migrations that's closed. Then we have these primary overflow things here, database migration testing, reindexing, partitioning, database schema validation, partitioning, and then all of this here, which is essentially operational, right? So these things are maybe things that don't belong to a specific epic, and that makes kind of sense, like bugs, right? Maybe some of the infra-dev things. So what this board would actually allow us is to be a little bit more specific for milestones, right? And say, or for our sort of next thing, and say, hey, we want to actually spend most of our time in this epic here, and maybe in partitioning. That's it, right? And the other things we're going to like move away because we already have a lot of operational bits in here. So that's this board. What needs to happen, and I think this is a philosophical thing, and then I'll pause. You don't see milestones here, right? It's not milestone focused. It's flow. It's sort of focused on flow, right? I personally think this is good because I believe what we're actually aiming for is moving things from ready for development to closed essentially as fast as we can, right? That's the cycle time. The milestones are essentially GitLab's release policy, right? For self-managed. They have actually nothing to do with our ability to develop those things, right? But what we need to do, because GitLab operates on milestone planning, right? And we, in this instance, is mainly Yannis, hopefully in the future with help of the team, is to say, okay, it's the 12th. This is the epic we're going to focus on in the next milestone in the next month, right? And these are the issues that we are very likely going to work on, right? And then they can go into ready for development. We can label them accordingly. That's fine, right? But this is a controversial opinion, right? Also in the product team. I personally don't really care about milestones that much because I would like things to just be done as fast as we can in the priority order. And if you deliver to .com, right, it doesn't really matter anymore. If it's done on the 10th, that's fine. If it's done on the 18th, that's fine. And okay, if it's done on the 20th, it's going to miss that specific release. There are some situations in which that's problematic, but more often, this is just, it should be a snapshot, right, in time, saying like, this is what's done at that moment. That's what we are going to bundle up. So my proposal here, and Yannis's as well, would be maybe to go forward and use something like that with the other boards that I'm going to explain in a little while. Thoughts?
I have a couple questions that I wrote in the agenda. I'll just verbalize them now. So, and I tried to write this down in the process issues. So there's a step 0 that's still kind of missing for me. How do issues go from just being in the backlog to labeled as active or labeled as database triage? Is there a subset of issues that we're looking at? Is it just anything labeled database or anything that's brought to our attention?
No, so the triage process, we have a separate board for that we're going to, I think, explain in a little while. But in terms of when does something get when does it get the active label? When does it go onto the build board? This to me is essentially sort of a constant planning exercise. If we have epics, this is a hypothetical now, and we know an epic has 10 issues, and we've decided the next 3 issues are, ABC, and they're all in dev, and then this column here, the ready for development column, will get smaller, right? And at that point, we need to decide, okay, given our priorities, what's the next thing here, right? And then you just apply the label and you fill the ready for development column. That's one way of doing it. sort of continuously. The other way of doing it is we have a planning issue, right, where we also assign the sort of deliverable label and for a milestone. And we can then also, for example, say, if everybody's happy with the planning, right, we're just sort of bulk moving most of these things into ready for development onto this board. And we're just going to treat it as the, enough work for another 4 weeks. The interesting thing is that you'll probably see that quite a few things pile up here. So I like to keep these boards really tidy, right? And if something sits and ready for development for longer than a couple of weeks, it's probably, too stale, right? It's like, it's actually not a priority. It's just hanging out there. You should remove it and reprioritize. So I think it keeps it very lean, right? It's like, this should never be super full, in my opinion.
Yeah. So
the triage flow I can explain in a second. Yeah,
it sounds like there's a prior step. So this is what the board, the development group should be focusing on, and there's a prior step that product looks at all of the issues and figures out what needs to come in. Okay. And then my other question is, and it might be a similar answer, how does this help with your milestone kickoffs? Because that's still a thing that needs to be delivered, right? And we all need to kind of agree what we're focusing on for the milestone. So does this help, or does it make it more complicated for your milestone kickoff videos that product has to deliver?
I think initially it probably makes it harder for product, because what we're actually doing is we're having a continuous flow, right? Where Yannis and I will need to figure out, at a point in time that to satisfy our release process, what will be next. That being said, as soon as you start actually organizing yourself into epics, right, it becomes pretty simple, right? Because I can say, like, I can show you my, this is my geo planning epic, like issue for 13.8. These are the epics that the team is currently working on. These are the next issues in these epics. That's what I talk about. We move them onto the board, right? And that's kind of it, right? So it shouldn't really be a lot of work, because you should talk about this pretty frequently, once a week, right? And then you're just saying, okay, what do we think is going to be the next thing for the next milestone? So it's a little bit of like wrangling, but I think I'm happy to do that.
That makes sense. I like it.
And also, can I say what you've shown from Geo? It's very close to what Patrick and Andreas were discussing about grouping on epics. So the planning there, if we check it again, is by epics, and then 1 or 2 or 3 people grouped for a milestone to do, for example, 2 people grouped to do Geo Patroni support, for example. And this feels very, very close to the discussion we had in the other issue.
Yeah.
I was going to say, sorry, Fabian?
No, sorry, please go ahead.
I liked seeing the group by epic view. We might need to clean things up a little bit, but realizing that those are 8 different epics, those issues is pretty good. So that's a nice way to visualize it. And also, I think we spend a lot of time working on issues that are, preparing issues, looking at things that are not on the milestone necessarily. So this, and together with the triage board, I think it makes just more visible what we are actually spending time on, and that's always good. So I'm sold on that. I would want to try.
Yeah, I'd like to try it too. I mean, I like it. I think it matches what I was thinking.
Cool. Then there are 2 other boards that I quickly wanted to discuss. One of which is probably less exciting, and frankly, the one that is also it's not necessarily like this is our sort of product priority board, right? We have like maybe issues that need to be like validated, right? Either the problem needs to be better understood or the solution needs to be understood before we actually feel comfortable scheduling this, right? And so this is a board that is mainly to understand sort of what is next and making sure that we don't just schedule stuff before it's ready. So on a regular basis, this may not need as much attention in the engineering call, because there's sort of the view of what's ahead, but it's not exactly what we need to do right now. And there's a further complication that I've encountered, where this is, I think, easier to do if you have a single issue, right, that describes a feature, right, a very encapsulated thing. But often, I prefer working with epics, right? And if we have validated an epic, right, and we have then 10 issues inside that epic, and we understand the epic very well, I don't need to move all of these issues through here, right? It doesn't make any sense. We just know, okay, the next 3 things can go directly to the build board. But this is sort of the more product planning area of things, and they still have a good number of items in there usually, right? Because sometimes maybe some of the things that we discussed today for infra, right, like certain features or things would come and sort of be moved through here, right? That's another board. But yeah, that is what that is.
My impression here is that if we get to the point where we're actually building features, then this would come more into play as we're trying to design it out, right? Okay.
Yes. But I think for now, the triage board is also, that's maybe more interesting, because that may be something that the team will interact with a little bit more. And so the way we thought about this, it's actually kind of neat, I think, even though I think the board is borked.
Does that say 50,000 open?
Yeah, I think I overwrote something. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So I'll just start with one here. So the idea that Janis and I had was this triage label essentially gets applied to anything. And it could be anything, like something where people feel this is like, we need to look at it. It may be something that the database group actually needs to investigate or not, right? And so by having a scoped label and applying it, this is not going to be all database labels, right? It's a small subset of things that we really want to investigate. And then there are essentially 3 steps to the decision making. The one is to decide, like, do I want to close it? Is it irrelevant? You can do that right here. You can throw it out. The next thing is to say, is this something that we actually should look into, right? As in, is it something that really belongs into group database, right? And that can then go into this column here. You can pick up that label. And after that, I think the question really needs to be, is this something that we need to work on right now, right? As in, is it a bug, then, or is it a priority? Then it goes to database active. Or is it something that we need to validate further, right? As in, it goes into the planning backlog, right? And we don't really need to do anything right now. We just need to keep track of it. It goes here. And this is quite neat, because this is a little bit of board magic, but because these labels are scoped, if you now move this here, or let's do this one, right? From group database into active, it will actually remove the database triage label. So if I reload the board, it's actually gone. So you can clean out a board, right? And you can now see it on the database active, on the build board. So it's sort of like and here, I think it's here. Or somewhere. I may have lost it. Anyways, right? I think it doesn't work because of the group database label. But in essence, this would be a super simple triaging process where, whoever in the team, if I can, this query is very slow. Essentially you can go through this backlog here, right, and decide where to go next. And that would be the sort of mini process here. I'll pause for questions.
I like it.
Pretty cool.
Andreas had a couple questions on some of the boards there too, about WIP limits and group labels.
Yeah, something that comes to mind when looking at the build board is sort of, and this is perhaps a question for later as well, is how do we keep the board tidy so that we don't end up having like a gigantic list again. But basically what we're saying is we put the active label on things that we sort of actively care about, or that are ready and that we intend to pick up very soon.
Correct.
And everything else doesn't have that label. So
no.
By that,
and so I can just
itself.
Yeah, so I can show you the Geo build board, and this has been running for a year and a bit, and it's a larger group, right? So there's a little bit more stuff going on here, right? But this is kind of how this looks after a week. So we have a bunch of stuff here in review, right? A couple of things closed out. All of this here is in dev, and these are the ready for development items, and a few things that we need to take care of. And we walk this entire board completely once a week as the group, and actually also look at, is there any craft in here? Is there something that we're just shoveling around, right, that isn't really a priority? And if you get into the habit of doing this, it becomes really sort of just like a ritual that the team does. And the effect this has had on the Geo team is that for like people go to this column here, like the ready for development item, right, and say, I have nothing to do anymore. Let me check what's in here, right? And then they just pick something and go next. And if you then are unsure as to why we are doing it, you can always look up the epic, right? And here, the epic view is a little bit more sort of constrained as to what we're trying to do. Right? We have like a lot of work in maintenance mode. We have a couple of sort of smallish things, right? But many things are in epics rather than in like nothing, right? And that is where you kind of want to be, where more than one person is working on this.
I haven't seen what the WIP limit does in GitLab. Is there a visual indicator when you go over the WIP limit? So like in Jira, the column will turn red if you hit your WIP limit or you go over.
Fabian, you're muted.
Fabian, you're muted.
Muted.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
No, I said like, yeah, I have, personally, I have no strong feeling on WIP limits. I would argue that unless, columns really flow over, right, and we observe that consistently, we don't need to do it. And if we really find that's an issue, we can. But I have no strong feelings, don't really care either way.
Yeah, mine was more of a question of what does it look like when you hit the WIP limit? What's the
know,
functionality?
Like
Nobody knows. Yeah, I found that in other companies with Jira, again, okay, same functionality. There was a lot of time spent talking about what's the WIP limit, and it didn't provide a ton of value.
Yeah.
So I kind of agree with you. It'd be interesting to put it in there at some point in time if we really find value there. But yeah, no, this is great. I do like this flow. I've used it for in other companies, and
yeah,
I'm up for using it on this team and the memory team actually, but we can schedule that later.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of it, I think.
Question about the label itself. There is also a database group label that's being used all over the place, basically, whenever something is related to database. Is the scope label also a group label? And if yes, does it not conflict with the existing database label?
So the group label is scoped by group. This here is scoped by database. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. So
no, what I meant is look at the first issue in the workflow in review column. It has the database label in blue. This is the one that's been around forever, basically. Everybody applies it when something is related to database. And then we have the scope level database, the active triage and all that. I wonder if that is also a group label and if it has potential to cause confusion for others seeing those two database labels.
Maybe I would maybe say that the database active thing is more of a, let's say, internal, to us and for our group process as how we manage ourselves. So we've had this in Geo, and essentially, like, people haven't really asked, right? They know how to apply the other labels, and this is just another thing in the large number of labels that we maintain. So that one concern that I had, but Yannis said this may not be a problem, is there are other things like database reviewed, right, and database, but they apply mostly to merge requests. So merge requests, so that shouldn't really be an issue either.
And the scope label has a good description, so it already says it's internal to our group and all that. So that's great.
And it's also bright pink, so
yes,
in contrast to the blue ones. So I assume that people will see that.
I'll just scare people away. Is that what you're thinking?
So maybe I figured out why we lost the issue. So when you move between lists, we remove the label of the previous list and add the label of the new list. So moving from group database to database active, it remove the group database, and then so most probably the way we are setting this, we don't need the group database label on those two boards, but we will refine that.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to share. I think we can give it a try, and my stance on process is if it's not useful, it should be eliminated. And so luckily, I think at least on this level, we have a lot of freedom as to how we do that. This thing has the advantage that it's also sort of 90% compliant with the official product development workflow. So if that ever becomes an issue, you can say, we've been doing this forever. So
I like this a lot. I think we should try it until it doesn't work anymore, right? We try to regularly review our processes anyway. So I think we should try this. And if we actually get the approval to hire more people, I think this workflow will be easier to use for a larger group anyway. So
it scales pretty well,
yep.
I think.
Yep. All right, we have 10 minutes and then I have to drop for sure. There are a couple more items. So Yannis, you're up next with the optional label.
Let's do planning first, because we have to, I think that planning is more important.
Yes.
So a quick discussion. So for example, with respect to what we were discussing, what the most important epic is, and that we agree that we should work on together with whatever else.
Yeah, I think we have some ideas, right? Like we need to really focus on the primary keys, especially the events, the one that's in progress. And the other one is finishing up re-indexing, but it doesn't sound like either of those will take everybody the entire milestone. And correct me if I'm wrong.
For the re-indexing, I think it's really just about adjusting the schedules a bit and waiting for those config changes and sort of getting that enabled. There's nothing more that we need to do about it. So I think this can be done on the sides.
Okay. So the top three from the RISE framework, top three epics were the re-indexing, primary key, and the migration testing. So those should be the big three. Those are the top three. If it's too many, I mean, we only have 3 team members. If that's spreading us too thin for the milestone, then let's talk about that in the planning issue. I think we're gonna have to go async on planning here. But if re-indexing is not really going to take any work, how much work do we think the primary key work is going to take up? And should we focus on the other tables that are up next? Because if it's going to take months to migrate, we should probably accelerate our work on the other tables that are in the top 4, I think is what we're looking at for the ones that are ready to go into overflow.
Yeah, the other ones are pretty small compared to events. The second one is, I think, 400 million. While for events, we have to work over 920 million, and a second table that is 600 million. So in total, we're going to go over 1.5 billion records. Why? I think that if everyone agrees, I would propose to move forward with events, add also the helpers for the events, for the finalizing, and maybe we can start with the next table, not in this, in the next milestone, in 2 milestones from now. I don't know if everyone agrees. So that we can check and monitor what happens with events for the first milestone. So we have our minds only to, you know, every day, let's check if the jobs are running, if any job is blocked, etc.
May I ask a really quick question? Because I think one of Patrick's concerns was that we work on too many things in parallel. And this is always the issue where I don't know how easy this is. But if we, for example, for our prediction for 13.9, focused only on 2 epics, right? Plus the operational like bits, right? The primary key re-indexing and the, what's the other one? The
migration,
automatic re-indexing of standard stuff. And we would be really, is that not enough? As in, like I'm saying, like if we really said like, okay, we're going to deliver only like six issues, right? We're focusing on those things. And maybe, you know, this is going to take us 2 weeks and we have a continuous flow now. At that point, we can talk about it and say like, hey, what's next, right? We're running out of work. But, you know, then we can eliminate a lot of these other things from the board and we just focus on those things first. That assumes though, and this is my question, that there is parallelizable work in these epics. As in, you can do more than 2 things at the same time. You know, otherwise that's not a good way to parallelize. It's just a radical thought.
I'm personally super excited about the testing with production. If I had to vote for one, I know that we have priorities, but personally, I feel that this is the most exciting, and it also aligns with our RISE ranking. So as long as, the issue for indexing is not going to take a lot of time, and if we are not going to partition to address more tables over additionally to the events, we only need to have one big issue on the primary key overflow that should be worked, and it's working on the helpers for finalizing the update.
Yeah, I think Giannis was agreeing with Fabian, but just with different subjects. So re-indexing, if I understood Andreas, is not going to take much time at all from the team. So the next 2 things that we should focus on primarily are the primary key overflow and the testing migrations. So, and it sounds like there's a desire across the team to narrow our focus to just 2 epics at a time, using this example, which I agree with. I think my concern for 13.9 is there's a lot of work in flight that needs to be finished up before we can do that narrow focus, right? We can't just drop what people are working on now, the however many epics we're working on now, the issues that are in flight. So wrapping those up and then being crisp about, okay, we're just working on these 2 things, there's the consideration for the operational things that come in from Jose and Jerry that require our immediate attention, right? So yes, I think the goal is to get there. I think there's just some things that we need to clarify that are in flight right now before we can be crisp on what we're doing, milestone over milestone. If that makes sense.
But it does to me, but maybe the suggestion is then, if we look at our current build board, there are a few things in review, right? And a few things are blocked, and there's a larger list of sort of ready for development items. We can essentially say, if this is still all correct, right, and we need to do all of those things, let's say we will. Mm-hmm. And then anything in addition to that is from the 2 epics just described. And that's it. And then, you know, we go from there, because I'm always a little bit too ambitious and I schedule lots of things, and then half of them are, you know, not really happening, not because people are not doing their job, but because of, you know, the world. And so maybe less is more. And if we are magically finished in a couple of weeks, we'll find additional items. So.
Agreed. I do have to drop off now. So I will continue my input on the planning issue. So I'm gonna drop off. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe Yannis, you can collect all of those relevant issues from the 2 epics, and then the issues that are still outstanding, and then we can put that in the planning issue, and that'll be that.
Yeah. So, do you agree? Also, Andreas, Pat, do you find this approach?
Yeah, totally. I think the database migration testing, it's not broken down well enough, I think. So it needs more thought, like what do we actually want to do? But there is a lot of work in there that can be parallelized, I think, going back to Fabian's question earlier. And then operational issues, there's a bunch anyway. So I think the question is also like, what do we consider taking as an operational issue? This is kind of the side door to the process. But we can see how that goes.
Yeah, I think there it's important to be, you know, so it's sort of the defensive art of not committing to too much, right? There's probably many things that people would like, but there's also a lot of things that may not really need to happen right now, right? I think we need to be careful. Yeah.
And so I'm going to update the planning issue, and I'm going to update the epic for testing with production data, because it's the new direction is a little bit different than what we had. We said last week that we're going to revisit it after security check. I think that we should update it either way. So I will start with an update, and then we can check it together. And then we can start thinking of the next issues that we can add there. And for the planning, let's add the epic. So let's discuss on the epics. So we know that we're going to work on that, and we will figure out. Are we in agreement? Yeah.
Makes sense.
And yeah, and the only additional thing is the finalizing the migration, the migration for the primary keys.
Cool. I need to drop off as well. But yeah, if you have any feedback on the boards or anything, just write in database in the Slack channel or in the process issue. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks for creating those boards.
Yeah, thanks to Yannis. Bye.
Cheers.
Okay.
Right, I'll stop the recording at this point.
Yeah.